Okay, everybody. Welcome to Tea Time Tuesday. I got everything ready today. My sugar, my books, my tea, my spoon, sugar, everything. Just let me pour this real quick. So if this is your first time joining me for Tea Time Tuesday, what I usually do is, well, for one, I make some tea. And I read books, and what I do is I try to read them, along, or have you kind of like join me while I'm reading them. This way you'll know what I'm reading, and we can see how far the book is going, whether it's interesting or not interesting. And then I give my opinions about certain things, and I do give my opinion about the book, of course. And sometimes I'll talk about maybe Emily Post, or sometimes, and I definitely try to throw in a lot of how to release stress. So, because right now, with everybody being on the edge, so many things are happening. I think people are just like going a little bit like they don't know what to do, they don't know how to move forward. And it's just that, we're at that point where we're at a time shift. Everything's changing, and everything's changing probably more because of the advanced technology that we have, and the changes of presidents, and everything, the whole dynamic of the workforce, and everything, just so many things are happening at once. And trying to grasp all of that, and trying to embrace it or adapt to it, it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. It's not like it was like in the 1930s, or the 1950s, or the 1970s. There was always a change every century, or every 30, or so decades. Things are going to change, and they're not always going to stay the same. And as humans, as we try to look at things, at everything that's happening around us, it's sometimes it feels like we're being overwhelmed with so much, or we're being taken advantage of, or we don't know how to deal with everything that's coming into our country. And it's just, that's what happens sometimes when you open the floodgates, and everybody starts coming in, and now we're trying to get them out, and it's just a whole thing. So, but don't live in despair, guys. Don't live in despair. Everything will be better. Everything will turn around, and everything that's happening, it's for a reason. So don't live in despair. Just keep doing what you're doing. And don't let it worry you. Sometimes we just shouldn't worry about things that we have no control over. Like, really, don't worry. So that's how I see myself. I try real hard not to worry about things that I have no control over. There's nothing I can do about it, but maybe pray. I can do that, and hope for the best. I can do that, and drink some tea. Okay. All right, so let's jump into the book, because I finally finished My Korean Deli. It wasn't the kind of book that the ending really did surprise me, because I was not expecting the ending to be the way that it did. Yes, I am going to order a tea ball, and because, yeah, I get really tired of some of the teas that I have don't have the string, and I constantly have to be like smushing it on the sides like that. So it's kind of, and I can't grab it because it's too hot. So definitely going to invest in a tea ball. Okay, hopefully you'll see it next time, and I just throw it over there. Okay, don't have sugar cubes right now, so I'm just using a spoon of sugar. Okay, so we got that done. I'm just gonna move all this up just a little bit because it's like really, really close to me. Okay, but yeah, so was reading the book and I thought I was gonna get something really different from the book, but it was like I was not expecting. Like I said, I was not expecting the ending to be what it was. And this is the true blueberry tea. What I'm drinking, it's Celestial True Blueberry, so it's really good. I really enjoy it. And so let me just move this a little bit more. I don't want to wet it. Okay. So we were at the last two chapters, and I said, you know what? That's it. I'm done. I'm just gonna read these chapters, and be done with it. So as you know, this guy, Ben Ryder, was he wrote about his experience about owning a deli and everything that he had to go through, and getting the business not more or less for himself, but getting the business for his wife, because she's the one who wanted to own a business before she was 30 years old, just like her mother. And so he just went along with it to help her dreams come true. And he didn't want to say no, it's not going to work. He just wanted to help her out and say, okay, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. Of course, he did work at the review. What's that called? I don't think it was called the Paris Review. It was called something else, or was it called the Paris Review? Anyway, he worked for a magazine, and unfortunately, his boss ended up dying. He was always going back and forth, going to the Paris Review, and then going back to the going to the deli, because they did finally buy a deli, and they just had a mishap with somebody named Dwayne, and he was always there, was there before they bought the store, and he was the nephew of the one who used to own the store, and them making orders, and then them selling things to minors, which they shouldn't be doing, and that kind of like the bills were just piling up and piling up and piling up, and they were constantly getting what is that called when people come and check up on you? Fined. They were always getting fined, and they were making more. They were dishing out more than what was coming in. So it got to the point where they're like, they don't even know if they want to continue with this deli, because it's just been hard on everybody. It was hard on the mother-in-law. It was hard on on his wife, and it was getting crazy with Ben, and so the whole thing was just like, wasn't sure whether it was coming or going, or what was the outcome with Dwayne. Were they going to keep him? Were they going to fire him? What were they going to do? So I finally got to the last chapters, and this is what happened. So it just so happens that I'm just going to read some of it. You must always know when to pull out, says the merchant. I can't even pronounce his name. A Bend in the River, one of the many excellent novels about running a store. So it says a businessman is someone who buys at 10 and is happy to get out at 12. The other kind of man buys at 10 and sees it rise to 18 and does nothing. He is waiting for it to get 20, which I'm not sure what the numbers mean. So I don't know. Maybe you guys know what it means. If you ever owned a store, maybe you know what that means. I don't know. So it came to that, and it was some sort of saying that I guess Ben remembered. Okay, so then finally finally it comes to how did you get out? How did you know when to get out? Finally, the signals to hear is too stubborn to act upon. Is the arrival of energetic and ruthless competitors. Blah, blah, blah. Deli owners, part of the generation of Jewish immigrants to ply the trade. The chain store kills the small man. The chain store kills the small man. So if you're trying to own a small business, more or less, if it's just a small, tiny business, you know, chain stores that are like multiples, like Subways and McDonald's and whatever, it's going to ruin the small guy because they're just, you know, out there making money and people are always going to them and they barely go to that small store that's probably in the middle of the street or at the end of the corner. It all depends. So then it goes on. Okay, so one day in 2004, when I opened the newspaper and read that a Manhattan real estate developer has bought a parking lot a block away from us and plans to build hundreds of apartments and 27 single-family homes there in the coming year. And so they still had a deli, and they were thinking about all the potential customers. And then Kay and so Gabby goes, takes the newspaper and reads it and says to the part where it left off, then says, but you didn't see this. Right after the part about the 200 apartments, it says that a developer intends to line the block with retail space, perhaps including a supermarket, which would be like a nightmare for a small deli store because for sure everybody's going to run to the supermarket and not even pay attention to a small deli. So that was like a red flag, like, oh my God, if that happens, like, we're done, like, we're so done. So so given that Kay was, you know, overdoing it, you know, the mother-in-law was really overdoing it with herself, and she did have like a fall, she had a stroke, and she ended up in the hospital. So on some days Kay would feel depressed and want to close the store, but then she'll get embarrassed for not being stronger and resolve to tough it out. So she'll be at that point where, you know, they're telling her, you know, you got to do something else. You can't run the store no more. You're at the age where you got to stop. And if you are going to do something, it has to be something else other than working crazy hours and trying to run something that's going to, you know, drive you into the ground. So, and like I said, she had gotten sick and stuff like that. So, Gav opens her. Oh, so they were getting a lot of fines, and they did get in trouble for selling cigarettes to minors. So they had to go to one of the, I think it was, what was it? It is a DMV from hell. You know, they come and search you. So they had to they got a letter saying that they had to go to court, an affidavit certifying that they have terminated Emo's employee. So Emo was the sister of Kay, and she was one of them who had sold cigarettes, I think it was, to a minor, and they got in trouble for that. So they had to prove to the courts that, you know, she was let go. So that happened with that. Okay, the Judiciation Division of Consumer Affairs really saw actual lawyers. Okay. So, so who do you call it? Kay went in to try, because they had to go to court to settle this, you know, the fine and everything. They tried to, you know, to try to get leniencies, and well, we did let it go. We'll try real hard not to let it happen again. Again, they're trying to save the store. So Gab went in with all her lawyer outfit, her briefcase, and everything, and papers. And even Ben was like surprised, like she was ready to fight for the store. Like she's really going at it. But at the end, they were like, "We'll let you know." So after all that was done and said, they just went back home, and they just had no choice but to wait for their response to what they were going to do. So when the letter arrived, um, yeah, it was not good. Had given us credit for the measures we have taken to prevent underage tobacco sales, including the firing of Emo. However, the letter says there was one measure we didn't take. We didn't fire the first person who originally got us in trouble for selling tobacco to a minor, which was Ben. Remember, he was the first one who sold cigarettes to a minor, but they didn't fire him. Well, they can't fire me because I was the owner. So it's too late now, and the city is denying our request for leniency. So yeah, no, they're going to have to dish out the fine, and they didn't say how much the fine was, but I'm pretty sure it was a nice stiff fine. So then finally, one stifling August evening, I stopped by the store on the way home from the review to check on Dwayne, Kevin, the college kid who was still working at the store. So apparently they did end up selling the store. They just couldn't keep up with it anymore, so they did let go. Hope I didn't jump this. Let's see. I think I jumped the page. No, I didn't. Okay. No, something last hour, some mistake, said gruesome. Oh, okay. So yeah, so they did that. The college student was still having a sandwich for dinner. Listened to a few of Dwayne's stories. At 8 o'clock, temperatures were still noon. Okay, so they had not yet sold the store, but for some reason, some mishap happened at the store, and they got robbed. And the phone rings later at 1 a.m. and they're saying, yeah, you have to hurry up, come down here because the store was robbed and there was blood on the floor. We don't know who got shot, who got hurt. But Dwayne, is that you? Who's there? What's happening? So he starts going on and on about what's going on. Yeah, what's happening? Gab asks, did we get robbed? And yeah, sure enough, they were trying to. They didn't get away. The robbers did end up in jail. They did have a gun. Like I said, I don't know who got shot. There was blood on the floor, but I don't remember. It could have been one of the robbers, maybe Dwayne. Dwayne then began beating the robber to a pulp, and luckily for both of them, a customer happened by and convinced Dwayne to let up. It could have been the robber that Dwayne was trying to beat senseless. But anyway, the Korean newspaper, the next day at the diner table, Gab says, I'm calling the Korean newspaper and placing the ad for the store. That's when they decided, yeah, it was time to let go of the store. I ain't leaving Brooklyn. It's been 6 years since they sold the deli, and during that time, I've forgotten a lot of things about it, so he's trying to remember, it's been so long, and I didn't think they were going to sell the deli. I thought they were going to make go of it. I thought that, Ben was going to reconstruct it, make it his, and it would be a happy ending, but it didn't work out that way. So they did sell the deli. And he was just remembering all the things that happened there and stuff like that. The one laid out Karl Marx in the Economic and Philosophical Manuscript of 1844, which I must have written at least 5 papers on in college, Running a convenience store isn't half bad for the soul. Mark said that under capitalism, workers were not self actualized because they merely worked as the equivalent of bolt tighteners or zipper checkers on an assembly line and never saw the fruits of their labor consumed by a living, breathing community. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so he goes back. It was called the Paris Review. So he goes back to the Paris Review where there was no future at all. I don't think he stayed in there because he was talking about everybody. It just it just wasn't moving forward. So I'm thinking that the Paris Review did end up closing down. One of my friends made it at the store. Okay, so ended up missing the part review I dreaded the most. I think he was talking about the ups and downs of what he went through. So then the one friend he made at the store, at the deli, was Dwayne. Although they had their ups and downs, things like that. Um, that was because even though they said no, Dwayne's life. Well, okay, so after they closed the deli and they moved on, Paris Review wasn't doing well, and I get the feeling that that closed as well. Um, it's like, okay, well then what happened to Dwayne? Dwayne, even though it was under new ownership, Dwayne still stayed there, but then finally the owners let him go. So he wasn't working at the deli anymore. And then after that, he was just, working side jobs, doing this, doing that. Dwayne, why don't you, they even asked him, Dwayne, why don't you open your own deli? And he was like, but Dwayne's ambitions were different. He didn't want to own anything. He didn't want to go through the managing and all that stuff because he's seen what could happen. He's seen what it entails. He didn't even want to be a part of that. So he would just do jobs here and there. So Dwayne interrupted, blah, blah, blah. I just underline a lot of key stuff so you'll know. Okay, so I guess Ben at one point, okay, so, so, they would see him in different parts of the city of New York and say, oh, what are you doing here? What's going on? And he goes, I thought you said you would never leave Brooklyn. He goes, yeah, and I never will, but he has to make money. He has to go here, he has to go there to make money. So that was what he shouted at me. I will never, I ain't leaving Brooklyn. That was what he shouted at me at the last time I talked to him. He wasn't sure exactly where he was that time. He started out on a train bound for Hempstead and slept past the stop. Now he couldn't tell which town he was in. He said, I'll call you back, he said wearily, but he never did. We went through our worst periods of not communicating. After that was 6 months where he didn't call. Finally Gab went to one of the department stores where he worked and asked a cashier what Dwayne's hours were, so she could come back and find him. The woman covered her mouth and ran away, and Gab knew. When the cashier's supervisor came back holding Dwayne's funeral program, she was already crying. So evidently this part made me cry. I was like, are you kidding me? He passed away. He ended up with an aneurysm. And yeah, so Dwayne had an aneurysm just 2 weeks before that. I think that phone call they had when he was supposed to call him back. So and that's when that within that week or so, that's when he had the aneurysm. Everybody said the same thing about the funeral. It was the most varied group of people. I mean, blacks, whites, Asians, Mexicans, old people, young people. It's not everybody knew him. Like everybody knew him. And so the same month as Dwayne's death, Gab and I finally moved out of Kay's basement. Like everyone who moves back into a parental household. So, but it says here they moved back in. So Kay did end up having a baby. She did get pregnant finally. Let me see, which should have been easy because a few months before we sold the store, Gab finally got pregnant. So it was a hard thing. After we sold the store, Kate went through something of a dark period. For the first time in all the years I've known her, she started talking about taking a break, from the family. So they did end up, like, no, they don't want to live with her no more. They want to live on their own, but because everything was just like up in the air, they weren't sure what they were doing. But that to me was heartbreaking, knowing that Dwayne didn't survive and that he did end up, not making it. I don't think I wrote down anything else. Anyway, they tried to make it work on their own, and then not really anything going on with the Paris review. Gab did end up getting a job, and so truth and birth endeavors. Not really much in this chapter, other than that. If I have learned anything from Kay, Dwayne, and George, who you think should have had nothing in common, it was A, they seemed to know exactly where they were. B, they cut their own path, venturing in different ways, of course, from the world they've been born into, as if self-knowledge gave them the confidence to take on unfamiliar situations. The store hadn't started out the store hadn't started out that way for me. It wasn't an adventure or even an attempt of self-discovery, but more of accidental voyage into highly foreign territory. However, for someone lacking the kind of confidence like Dwayne, Kay, and George had, it was a good, maybe the perfect way of finding it, for which I felt lucky indeed. So, and that was it. They ended up moving back with Kay, and she ended up babysitting for them because, with the baby, who was going to take care of the kid. So they ended up moving back with Kay. The author's notes. So really that, like I said, wasn't the ending that I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a more happy ending, but it wasn't. So in this one, the author's note. So I guess he just started writing for his own sake. Occasionally, over the last few years while writing this book, I've gone back and interviewed people who might appear in the story. Once I had visited a Brooklyn character named Carmen Sinoka, who used to sell us produce from his stand on Court Street. When I told Carmine I was writing a memoir, he laughed. And he goes, well, you bought the deli so that you can write a book, didn't you? Admit it. Which I thought was funny. I had to ask myself, was he right? Could I have been one of the motives secret even to myself? However, the truth is when we bought the truth is when we bought the deli, I was involved in an entirely different kind of writing project, a work of journalism, and way too hard-headed to even think about switching to something else as self-selling as a memoir. So I didn't begin keeping serious notes on the deli until we've been in the business for a while, which later complicated the job of writing considerably. I had lots of memories, vivid memories, painful memories, but it wasn't always easy to sort them out or remember things like when, what happened when. In theory, having access to memories of family members should have made things easier, except everyone remembers things differently or not at all. So did he write the book? And this is him. He's the writer. That's him. So did he write the book too? Because some people are like that. They'll go into certain. This happened, I think, in the late '60s, where people were like, just like on YouTube when they used to, they're running out of content. They didn't know what to do anymore. It was getting hard trying to think of new things to do for content or whatever. Writers back in the day used to go through the same thing. They'd have writer's block. And it would be so bad. It would be so bad that they would like literally like go and seclude themselves in a faraway area where nobody could bother them, out in the woods, in a cabin where they could be alone so they can think without all the noise around them, and they would be able to concentrate on writing a book. But and then other people would I don't know if you ever saw that movie with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt where they were together. They made a movie together, and he was a writer, and she was like, of course, just going along with the writing. But it just seems like making that movie, it was about them trying to gain content for writing a book, because at the end of the movie, it was just all about them getting information. What would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? So it was just a way of trying to find how to write another book, a story of a situation that they end up taking a story out of if certain things were to happen a certain way. And a lot of people were basing the books on that. What would happen if I moved over here and, and I lived differently? What would happen if I had, I got married, but I had another wife, who knows, over here? I mean, and you'd be writing a book about that experience, well, I'm not saying exactly like that, but that's more or less how they got some of their stories out. But again, like I said, at the end of the book, that was not the ending that I expected. So all in all, it was what it was, and I'll give it, I don't know, 1 out of 10. I think I'll give it a 6, only because I really did like Dwayne. When I heard that he was gonna, they suggested to him to open up his own deli, I said, now that would have been a great idea. You've been in the business, or were taking care of the business for so many years. It just would have been right to open your own store, But that didn't happen. And so yeah, so that's how he ended up writing the book, Ben, of My Korean Deli. Like I said, totally different than what I had expected. Oh well, we're gonna move on. So just a little bit side note that I wanted to read or talk to you about again, releasing stress. And I would suggest, give yourself some challenges. That's the best thing you can do. Trying to find outlet of not overthinking of, okay, what am I going to do today, or what am I going to do tomorrow? How am I going to not be sad because this is not happening or that's not happening? Sometimes you have to just get yourself out of like a closed-in box, and you're trying to find a way to escape. And sometimes giving yourself challenges will help you do that. So create a challenge for you. Create, like I think I mentioned before, create goals and try to stick to them. Try to keep things organized. Always make sure you put things in a certain spot so you won't be going crazy to look for them later. Always put like, okay, this pencil is gonna go in here. It's gonna be there every day, more or less. Always find a spot. Like I said, everything has a home. So always find a spot so that when you're looking for it, when you look, it'll be there. That's what I do. I always make sure certain things are in certain areas so I won't go crazy trying to look for them at the last minute. So, make yourself some little challenges. That will definitely help you out a lot. Okay, so another thing I was gonna say is just one thing, and that's about clothes. Clothes, you guys are always seeing me wear the same thing, so I'm never worried about, or maybe I'll have my hair up, and maybe I'll have my hair down, maybe I'll have it curly, maybe I'll have it straight, but that's just my hair. When it comes to clothing, we just tend to always want to wear something different, and then you're like, oh, but I wore that last week, or I wore that the week before, and no, they already saw that. You stress yourself out trying to figure out what is it that they didn't see. Well, why do they have to see something different? Like, I don't get it. If it's gonna help for you to feel better about yourself, or maybe do something that's just very, very minimal, like wear a different necklace, or wear a different headband. It doesn't have to be your whole outfit, because no one's really going to see you from the waist down anyway. It's just the same thing when I was watching news anchors. They would say, oh yeah, sometimes they'd be be in such a hurry that they will only be worried about what they're seeing from here up, and not worrying what's on the bottom, because they're in a hurry and they don't have time. You got to be in front of that camera, and you got to be in front of it ASAP. You forget it. Worry about it later. Just wear what you're wearing that's good enough. But when you worry about what you're gonna wear. That's how come I think uniforms are great. You're wearing the same thing all the time. But if you're at a place where you always have to constantly change, that's hard. That could be really, really hard. There's our staples that certain staples in any wardrobe for a man or a woman. You have your blazer, your A-line skirt, or for a guy, a certain suit, or a nice blazer for them too. Certain shirts, have them iron, whatever. But there are staples that you'll always be able to mix them up. You have a black shirt, a brown shirt, a white shirt. You'll always be able to switch them out. They're just staples. Shoes the same way. You have gym shoes, high, low tops, high tops, whatever. But if you're going to be having 100 shoes, 100, different things, you're going to go crazy trying to figure what's going to match with what, and you're just going to stress yourself out. So me, I like wearing this because it's the same. I like the sweater. It's chilly in here, and I really don't have to worry about changing my shirt because it's the thing I always wear. I feel comfortable in it. So why am I going to change it to something else and sit here and not be comfortable? That doesn't make sense. So yeah, so don't always worry about what it is that you wear. You don't have to change every single time. I remember reading this one about one model, I think it was. I don't know where I read this, but she was talking about, she went to this party. She was dressed. It was beautiful. I think she bought it or she made it. I don't know. I think she bought it. And she went to this party and she had a blast. Everybody loved her dress and everything like that. So then she was invited to another party and she wore the same thing. And somebody came up to her who saw her at the last party. She goes, didn't you wear that dress at the other party? And she didn't think anything of it. She was just you know, hey, it made her feel good. She thought she looked good, and then that was the whole point of it all. And she goes, oh yeah, I did. And she goes, and she said to the other girl, and this thing, yeah, but you're wearing this. She goes, yeah, but don't I look good? Even though the girl might have seen her at the other place, but she still looked good at this party too. So she didn't really worry about what she was wearing. She just wore the same thing again, not really thinking, but didn't really expect that somebody else was gonna bring that out and say, didn't you wear that to the last party? So, but you know, I still look good in it, don't I? So I remember, I don't know where I read that or where I read that, but I do remember reading that. So I thought that was really something, because again, you know, we overstress ourselves about what we're going to wear, how we're going to look, and everything like that. I mean, if it's something, like I said, small, like a new necklace, a new hairstyle, whatever, that's fine. But don't go crazy trying to switch everything every day, every time you go on. It's not going to hurt you to wear the same thing, you know, over and over again. It's just like you know, when you go to these PR places, and they're basically always wearing black everything in the public relations, you know. And you see them at the door or whatever, they're all always wearing black shoes, black skirts, black pants, black shirts, black everything. And why not? Because they're not there to impress or show anybody off. They're there to represent whatever, whoever they're working for. They're there to serve the whoever, the creator or whatever. But yeah, but they basically always wear black. So, and you don't have to worry about color changing or anything like that. But anyway, yeah, so don't think too much about your wardrobe. It can, if you have way too many clothes, like I said, it can drive you batty. Just have staples, you know, like I said, certain colors, brown, beiges, navy blue, whatever. Maybe warm colors for the winter, and you know, cool colors for the summer. And you could always just switch everything off. You could wear pants, skirts, blouses with the pants, blouses with the skirt. You always could find a way to, you know, even have maybe a corduroy pants or a corduroy jacket, you know, or a trench coat. You know, it just, believe me, if you have just certain staples of a wardrobe, you could always change it up, and you can change it up a lot. I guess I probably got that when you play with Barbie dolls when you're little and stuff like that, you know what you can switch off or what you can't, you know what I mean? So it's always a good thing that you know, women play with Barbie dolls when they were young. Okay, guys, I am going to leave you with that. Again, my name is Emma, and I'm always here on Tuesdays drinking a cup of tea. And so glad that if you did come on here, thank you for joining me. And yeah, you can always like, subscribe, definitely comment, and yeah, we'll see you next time. And I will be having a new book. I'll show you the cover of it next week. And again, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time on Tea Time Tuesday. Bye.